Hi, everyone. I am Christy Davis, and I am here interviewing the awesome Mimi Brown, who just did a program for us at NSA Michigan called Pulling Back the Curtain, Methods and Magic to Make Your Keynote Irresistible. And in this program, Mimi, you shared your 7-step rehearsal process that you used to create your main stage influence program, Skyrocket Your Sales. So
Yep.
your program was inspired by this surprising, amazing, and I think you even used the word terrifying phone call that you received to speak at the National Speakers Association Influence Conference 2022 this past summer. It doesn't get much bigger than that, on the main stage. So what was it like when you received that phone call? What was going through your head?
I actually was looking at the phone like, did she have the right person? Because you said Mimi Brown. I'm like, so you mean this Mimi? Like me? You don't mean another Mimi? But
Oh,
it was I was shocked. And I will tell you, it wasn't something that was on my radar. I had never even considered that I would be main stage. So
isn't
it
that
was a big honor.
That's amazing. So, as you know, I am a professional entertainer as well as a speaker. And it struck me when you gave your program that your rehearsal process for this very high stakes presentation utilized so many theatrical tools. It was so similar to how one would prepare for a theatrical production. So, how did you come to utilize so many things that we use in the theater? And can you name one or two of your favorites?
Absolutely. So first I have to give credit to two, actually three people, Amy and Michael Port, because I actually went through their class, Historic Public Speaking. So I adjusted my approach based on some of their recommendations and their background. And number two, I had a really great coach. So shout out to Pat Dwyer, who's actually a member of NSA Wisconsin and also a national member. But Pat's background is actually in improv. And he has done probably, Chrissy, and I'm not exaggerating, about 10,000 shows. And
Wow.
he knew the part, he really drove home to me the part of getting it wrote, like practicing it, crafting it, thinking about your audience. And so in relation to a couple things is as far as the rehearsal process, is really knowing your staging well enough. That was big.
Mm.
And what was eye-opening for me is I actually flew out to Wisconsin for an event and happened to be able to work with Pat because that's where he lives. And we took a space at this event center, and he actually took the time to rope off what that stage would look like. So we knew what the dimensions would be. I had a picture of the stage, and a few times based on our rehearsal practice, I actually fell off the stage. He's like,
Right?
maybe you're on the other side. But it was
Safety fell
helpful
out.
to know that, right? Like to
Mm.
know the how the space would work, and especially also in relation to any props that I would be using or any movement that I would have on the stage. And I think sometimes as speakers, we don't put enough thought into how we will move on stage to have the maximum impact for our audience.
Especially when you're on such a huge stage as you were most recently.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mimi, one thing you are not is a boring speaker. No one's compelled to check their phones for the latest puppy videos on TikTok while you're speaking. We know that. You put a lot of effort into keeping your audience engaged. You use the full stage, like you just said. You use props, music, multimedia, even dancing, my favorite, as you know, and all these things to delight your audience. But what I want to know is what was most fun for you about being on the main stage?
The most fun was actually the behind the scenes portion. So I had a chance to come in, of course, a few days ahead of time, and we did a quick rehearsal. And then being backstage with the MCs. So at Influence 2022, there were three MCs who were amazing. Rob Foray, hey Foray, I think I got that right. Rob will tell me if he sees this video and I got it wrong. Amy Clymer, and then also Quinn Conyers. And each MC had their own style and their purpose. And so seeing them behind the scenes, prepping the speakers, prepping themselves was amazing. And one of my favorite moments that most people don't know is even if you saw the main stage presentation is that Quinn did two very cool things. She introduced me. And so I asked her literally 5 minutes before I went on stage, hey, Quinn, I'm going to dance going on stage, which I had practiced, but I want you to stay on stage with me, because she was already like, that's just part of her groove. So we kind of danced it out. But then one of the moments in the talk, I used bananas as an analogy for money. And Quinn, when she heard this, her like MC antennas went off, and she said, I need bananas right now. So she's sending people all throughout the hotel looking for bananas, so that as she came back on stage and did a recap of my talk, she could use it as a prop. And it was so brilliantly done.
I love that you collaborated. That's just a perfect example of how to collaborate and elevate both of you, right? Elevate the whole thing for everyone.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned the incomparable Beyonce, if you like it, then you should have put a ring on it, right? As your role model. And I think you said you were kind of channeling your inner diva through thinking about Beyonce, right? While you were on stage, you were powering up with her. So people like Queen Bee and like you make your craft look so second nature. I think it's easy to think, well, they're just a natural, it's easy. That's why they're so great on stage. And of course, I'm sure you do have natural ability, but truth be told, both you and Beyonce have a ferocious work ethic. So much went into making your main stage program look easy and natural. And I want to know, how hard was all that preparation for you, and why do you think it was worth it?
So one of the things I will admit is that prior to this process, I was not very good at prepping. I would make all kind of excuses about time, or that I do better when I'm spontaneous. Many of the things that I talked about at the start of the program for NSA Michigan. And I had a come to Jesus moment with Pat. And he said, hey, Mimi, like, if you want this to be really good, which I already knew, you need to make sure you elevate it. And so interestingly enough, Pat and I were working on my signature keynote, Own Your Swag. And we had worked so hard on it that as we craft each section of it, and the neat part is I got a chance to craft it, go do it, chance to then record it and go do it. And so you can keep making tweaks and build upon it. And I saw the magic happen when I got my first standing ovation after we'd been working on it. And I thought to myself, man, if I have that just from working on my signature keynote, then imagine what will happen if I use that same energy towards influence. And so we put the time in, and the fruits of the labor is you're able to be, as Eleni Kalako says, you're able to be, there's freedom in the form, you're able to be present in the moment and step outside of something if something happens, but you're not thinking about the next thing you want to say, you're just in it.
Yeah. So when something does happen and things you've mentioned have gone wrong, you're just not so flustered because you're so solid on everything else. You're so prepared. You can improvise in the moment when you have to. I think that's so important. So crafting and learning a new speech can be so daunting. I know, I have done it. And I love how you break down the steps for developing our own speech rehearsal process. So is there one aspect of your rehearsal process that you find to be absolutely essential?
It's really this first step of ideate. And I, depending on how you count, sometimes I'll tell people it's 5 steps and sometimes it's 7. It really is 7 if you look at ideate and refine, and those things are happening naturally. And the ideation part for me is key, because that's when you're working your ideas out. So you're able to storyboard. And that was a game changer for me when I learned how to storyboard, because it wasn't me trying to sit in front of a PowerPoint and go, come out. Or then I would get whatever the idea was, or I would get distracted if I was looking for a photo of an animal or something that was going to help illustrate a point or create an analogy around it. And 2 hours later, I'm not any further along in the
go down that internet rabbit hole. I know.
Correct. You're on TikTok and you're like, oh my gosh. So really,
good procrastination tool.
Yes. It's really the ideate part, and then the preview review. And that was a piece for me that's essential, because sometimes as speakers, we don't want to it's two things. We don't want to put ourselves out there like, what if it doesn't work? But think about it. You don't want to practice in front of your first audience. You want to be able to refine it to the point where you know what works, you know what makes people laugh, you know what reaction you're going to get out of folks. And it's helpful to get that feedback. But as I said in the NSA Michigan program, is being very clear about the type of feedback that you're looking for at the stage that you're on within preview review.
Yes, very important. Speakers don't always realize that it's not just your speech that requires attention, but also what happens right before you step on stage or dance on stage, as in your case, as well as right after you finish your speech. So we call these bookends intros and outros, right? And they are done by, say, the person that's introducing you. Why is it so important for a speaker to take control of her own intro and outro?
Definitely. Oh, such a good question, Chrissy. So one is there's a concept in speaking, or more like a principle called primacy and recency. People remember what they hear first and what they hear last. And oftentimes we believe that the first words or our presence is what people experience, but it's even before you get on the stage that you're setting the tone. They're trying to find out, oh, am I going to like this person? Am I going to like the topic? And most importantly, am I going to pay attention? Is this going to be different? And so your intro sets the tone for that. The other part is your outro lets them know what to do next. So because you want to be seen as the expert and also have a little bit of what I call like celebrity status, you want to tell your audience what to do next. Go buy Mimi's book. Go visit her at the autograph stand. Go take a selfie with her. Go visit her website. Because it's different if I say it as a speaker versus if someone else says it, even if I wrote it as my introducer. The other part that's super key, and for the folks who attended, you will get the checklist for this, but it's so vital that you do a check-in with your introducer. So one of my favorite, unfavorite stories is I always send a copy of the introduction ahead of me arriving at the event. And I'm very specific when I give instructions about reading the introduction. And I say to them, hey, read it as it's written. So I have a client who I check in with her about 20 minutes before the start of the program. And I said, did you get the introduction? Because I also have an extra copy typically handy. And she said, yes. And I said, okay, do you have any questions about it? Just want to ensure that you're going to read it as it's written. And she said, oh, well, I rewrote it. You did what?
Oh, no.
She said, I rewrote it. I said, well, why would you rewrite it? She said, oh, because it had funny lines in it and I'm not funny. And I said, well, guess what? If you read it, you will be funny. It's written and done very professionally. And I had some folks who are specialized in humor help me develop it. And you're also, as I also said to them, you're setting the audience up for success because I'm getting a chance to warm them up. And so she reluctantly looked at me and said, okay, Mimi, I will read it as it's written. And so, okay, good. So when she reads it, she comes back to me and I said, well, how do you think that went? She said, oh my God, they laughed. Imagine that.
Boom. All right. So is there anything you might do differently now that you've had this wonderful experience on the main stage, which was a huge success? But is there anything you think you might try to do differently the next time you have a high stakes presentation?
Well, two things. And it's actually one of them is my rule that I went against, but I did it anyway, which is at the very end of my talk, I actually tried a new product I'm using called Talkadot, which is a way that you get feedback from your audience. And it was literally a last minute choice about an hour beforehand because I thought, oh, this will be neat to get feedback from the audience. And I've been wanting to use this tool. And it was actually a fellow speaker who's in the audience who created it. And I'm an ambassador for the program. And I totally got the URL wrong. So I literally gave the wrong URL from stage. Not my finest moment. And I would not do that again. But good lesson because you actually don't want to change anything before your presentation. It'll totally knock you off your game. So that's one. And then number two, if I could change anything about the experience, it would be to have water on stage. So there's a moment during my keynote where, for whatever reason, and I know better than this, is actually two things I typically do. One is I throw like a cough drop or like a mint or something in my mouth to keep my mouth moist. And I didn't do that because I have like a little gig, pre-gig pack that has all of my supplies. And my mouth was so dry on stage. It was one of those moments where I'm like, and I normally have water and I know where it's placed, on stage, but I said, I don't need it. And so I had to kind of pull it together. I don't even know if the heavens opened and gave me like a surge of saliva or what have you, but I was doing okay. But it was a moment where I was like, so I
Oh,
wish I
that's
had.
the worst. I know. I hate when that happens.
There's nothing you can do about it except for get some water.
Get some water. So not all speakers are going to be on the main stage speaking to thousands, and not all speakers even want to do that. How do you think your methods and magic can apply to those giving talks to smaller audiences, or maybe even people who are trainers?
Oh, absolutely. So it's really about the practice piece. And to me, the crispness of your rehearsal practice and the deliberateness that you put into it is what the output of your audience will see. What I found, and Chrissy, I don't know if this is true for you, but when I have a newer keynote I'm working on or tweaking, or even for me, typically I'm working on it in parts. So I might try a new story or an anecdote or even a transition or a concept. I'm looking to see the reaction from people. Did I have the right laugh line? Did I, rein it home for people? And I'm typically looking for their reaction. And so for me, like the benefit is to really hone in on how do I take this down kind of in little bite-sized chunks so that it works for my audience. And so it's incorporating a rehearsal process, no matter where you are. If you're practicing in front of 20 people or 2,000 people, the process should still be it should be the same.
Great. So I'm just going to wrap up with two more questions, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
So Mimi, it is so wonderful to think back to 2011 when we met at NSA Michigan. And I believe at that time you were attending Toastmasters meetings and working on your material. Is that true?
That is very true. Yeah, that was early days.
Yeah. And then you and I attended an 18-month program called ProTrack, which was the professional speakers training program through NSA. I think it's now rebranded as Michigan Speakers Academy, if I'm
correct. Yeah.
Correct. But flash forward 8 years from when we met, you're president of NSA Michigan. You are a national motivational leadership speaker. You've launched Amp Up Success, your company. And then fast forward a couple more years, and you are a speaker on the premier stage at Influence. What an exciting trajectory. It's just amazing to watch your journey. And I just wonder, how did NSA help you get to where you are today?
NSA is, as the kids would say, I don't know if they really say this, but it's everything. Like, I remember, Chrissy, and I talked about this in the program, walking into the Holiday Inn in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It was March of 2011. And someone looked at me and said, "Welcome home." And I didn't know it at the time, but that was a life-changing, career-changing moment for me that totally, to your point, changed the trajectory of my life. It was just a dream and a hope. And NSA, what I often say to people is, there are people like newer folks, hey, are they going to help me get a gig? They might. Well, am I going to learn some things to make my presentation better? Probably. Will I learn how to sell and market better? Yeah. The key, that's not where I go. It's people like you. It's the community that I have. It's knowing that I was hanging around the people who were doing what I wanted to do, who understood me, like they were my people.
Yeah.
And continuing to pour into me. I have resources and I've made lifetime connections and friendships with people. And I just feel really blessed to have found NSA. And so every time I meet a speaker who hasn't heard of NSA or hasn't attended a meeting, I'm like, you need to go. And I'm not even going to tell you to join. You just need to go experience it and find out if we're your people. So everything from my fantastic mastermind, we call ourselves the Seven Figure Sisters, Kim Becking and Shauna Suko, having great mentors like Chris Clark Epstein and Marilyn Simonik and Leslie Charles and Lenore Billings Harris, like all these people in my life who have poured into me. I can't even quantify for you the impact that the National Speakers Association and NSA Michigan has had on me. It is, I get teary and I'm getting like chills as I talk about it because I wouldn't be where I am today without NSA.
It's such an extraordinary group of people, and really that group is founded on, cooperation and helping each other out, and
Yeah.
I love it as much as you. One last thing, Mimi, if you could leave, this is where you get, you don't have to really answer my question, but if you could leave our members with one final word of advice or something I missed, I didn't ask you about, what would it be?
It's actually going to be Christy around NSA. Keep showing up. We need you. We need your energy. We need your ideas. We need your presence. We need you. So what I find is as people make different transition points to their career, like I remember early on, I was like at every meeting, at every ProTrack event. And then as my business has picked up and life has gotten a little bit busier, I haven't been as present as I wanted to be. But when Carol became president, I wanted to check back in and to make sure that I'm there because so many people poured into me. I want to do the same thing for others. And so we need you. We need you to show up. We need you to share your expertise. We need you to offer your perspective. And that's what's going to make our organization better and stronger.
Well, on that wonderful note, I would just like to say thank you so much, Mimi, for taking the time. You have a very busy schedule, but thank you for taking the time to talk to me and to all the people that are going to watch this video. And I cannot wait to see you again on the main stage or at NSA. So you're
Thank
just
you.
awesome. And
Mwah.
see y'all soon.
All right.